flags of the delegates of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions. There are 8 members and 2 associate members, so we will start with that procession before we get into the activities that are planned on that agenda for you this morning. The flags will be carried by students representing Queen's College, Bishop's High, St. Rose's High, St. Stanislaus College, St. Joseph High, Brigham Secondary, Cummins Lodge Secondary, Richard Ishmael Secondary, Tutorial High, and Kingston Secondary. The first flag to be introduced will be Guyana. Antigua and Barbuda. Dominica. Jamaica. St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Lucia. And last, but by no means the least, Turks and Caicos Islands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may have your seats. Good morning once again. We are honored to have several special guests with us this morning, so on behalf of the host, we want to acknowledge a number of them. Honorable Gail Teixeira, MP, Minister performing the functions of the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, and also Chairperson of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption and United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Honorable Madam Justice Cummins Edwards, OR, CCH, Chancellor of the Judiciary. Honorable Manzoor Nadir, Speaker of the National Assembly. Honorable Ashmi Singh, MP, Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance. All other members of Parliament present here this morning. Brigadier Godfrey Best, Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force. His Excellency Professor Louis Franceschi, Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Canon Mark Kendall, Chairperson of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. Dr. Roger Corenteng, Head Public Sector Governance of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Distinguished delegates, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of government and private sector organizations, chairpersons and commissioners of the Guyana Integrity Commission and the Public Procurement Commission, members of the National Coordinating Committee for the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption and the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, special invitees, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the opening of the 9th Annual Conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions. This year's theme is Resetting the Anti-Corruption Agenda, Assessing Achievements and Challenges in the Commonwealth Caribbean. I know you're all very busy people, so I want to say a very special thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us this morning, notwithstanding your very busy schedules. The Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies was formally established by the Commonwealth Secretariat at its first conference held in Grenada in June of 2015. The association's key objectives are to promote development of knowledge and expertise related to professional ethics, to identify and resolve obstacles in the fight against corruption, and to facilitate interactions among members of that association. The conference, which now takes place annually, is sponsored by the Commonwealth Secretariat and hosted by a different country each year. It is both an honor and privilege for Guyana to be this year's host. Being the host does not only allow us the opportunity to have the largest delegation in attendance, but it gives us the opportunity to also showcase our culture. The conference brings together from the association's membership, heads of anti-corruption agencies, senior government officials, relevant international organizations, policymakers, and development partners, who over the next 3 days will be sharing their experiences, knowledge, and practices in combating corruption in their respective jurisdictions. The conference will take the form of a combination of presentations by experts of various anti-corruption fields, panel discussions on sub-themes, and country reports by the jurisdictions that comprise the association. Among the topics that will be discussed during this conference are factors that impact anti-corruption in the pursuit of sustainable economic development of the region, anti-corruption achievements and challenges in the Commonwealth Caribbean, anti-money laundering compliance in Caribbean, collaboration and synergy among anti-corruption bodies, and the role of religion in fostering behavioral change in the fight against corruption. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask you to stand for the invocation, which will be done by Aruni Seeley, student of St. Rose's High.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Where knowledge is free. Where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Where words come from the depth of truth. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Thank you, Ms. Seeley. You may be seated. So, to start this proceedings, I have the honor of inviting our first speaker, Canon Mark Kendall, to give us brief remarks. Canon Kendall is the chairperson of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. That's a tongue twister, I must admit. Welcome, Canon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I accept the protocol that you have established so graciously, save and accept firstly to give recognition on behalf of the Association to the Honorable Gail Teixeira, Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, standing in for the Honorable Prime Minister and also in her own capacity. Minister Teixeira, together with other members of the Cabinet, we are very happy that you not only acquiesced to the holding of this conference in Guyana, but you also provided funding for it. I believe you need to give a round of applause. Madam Chair, secondly, I want to recognize the Minister herself in particular and her team in general for hers and their commitment to this conference. I take the opportunity to name Ms. Kavita Bowani and to thank her for her initiatives, her cooperation, her dedication, industry, and also for the sweating she has exerted over the last few months and in particular the last 2 days. And that deserves a round of applause as well. Madam Chair, I accept the protocol, save and accept secondly, to note how pleased members of the executive of the association are to have the Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Professor Louis Francisci, in attendance at this forum. Your Excellency, this association was birthed under the auspices of the Commonwealth Secretariat and has been nourished, sustained, and invigorated by it for the last 10 years. That, Dr. Roger Corentin, your head of public sector governance, has been the hub of the association for this entire period, has attended our monthly executive meetings, and is present with us again at our annual conference here in Guyana, is indicative of his and the Secretariat's unfailing interest in the people of the Caribbean. Madam Chair, allow me to repeat the protocol that was extended to members of the executive of the association. I must publicize that my colleagues, all experienced professionals, singularly and collectively exemplify the spirit of volunteerism, a passion for regional collaboration, an unswerving interest in the standard of living of the peoples of the Caribbean, and have endeavored to effect the vision and mission of the association, pro bono, and notwithstanding their substantive jobs and vocations. I also find it necessary to make mention by name of one who is with us virtually, an indispensable IT wizard who holds the association up and together in a multiplicity of ways, Mr. Jovan Fleming. In addition, we are ever mindful of those who have planted the seed and paved the way for progress and achievements of the association, not least among whom are the late chairman of the Integrity Commission of Guyana, the late Kumar Doraisamy, and present with us, our erstwhile indefatigable secretary, Ms. Lisa Hanneman. Lastly, Madam Chair, I take the risk and the extreme liberty, for good reason, in this place where I'm standing, to recognize again, very unusually, myself. I grew up in Caesar Street. My formative education at Miss Kelly's School, Dolphin, and Bishops. Did data processing at GNCB. Taught at Houston Community High School, and did ministry for the Anglican Church throughout the coast of Guyana, from Charity in the Essequibo to Line Path in Berbice, including at almost every Anglican church, encompassing Legwan in the Essequibo River, Santa Mission in the Demerara River, Sandhills in the Berbice River. I want to say that all of this started during my boyhood days at St. Anne's Church in Agricola and came to fruition at my stations at All Saints in New Amsterdam, St. Paul's in Pleasance, St. Mary the Virgin in Bedford-Wachting, and St. Bridget's in Paramaribo, Suriname. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thankful that successive governors, governments, and the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands have allowed me to serve them as a commissioner of the Integrity Commission over the years. However, let it be known that any of my pursuits outside of Guyana have been forged and built upon my training and experiences inside of Guyana. Colleagues and anti-corruption practitioners, during last year, a relative of mine went to the registrar's office here in Guyana to get a birth certificate. Since she is acquainted with the Registrar General, she went directly to him, impressing upon him that she needed the birth certificate within a few days. Members of anti-corruption agencies, the story that was relayed to me, and I can only tell you what was relayed to me since I was not there, was that the registrar said, first, it was not necessary to go to him directly, even though he was an acquaintance. Secondly, he instructed my relative to return to the front desk to the clerk who was receiving applications. Thirdly, he said that he had put processes in place that didn't necessitate anyone circumventing them. Furthermore, he told my relative that had she gone to the office earlier in the day, that she would have received the certificate that very day. But that notwithstanding, that with the application that she was doing that afternoon, the birth certificate would be ready for pickup in 24 hours. The part of the story that was not relayed to me was how much US dollars my relative had to offer to the Registrar General for getting the certificate in what she thought would be a few days. I want you to think about this, because, colleagues, this story highlights some of the aspects and the principles that anti-corruption bodies need to embrace as we collectively fight. We are involved in the fight of anti-corruption. The efficiency of systems, the precluding of the giving of bribes, public servant departments that are headed and staffed by visionary, proactive, incorruptible, and conscientious persons. As Citizen Reed, that should not anticipate that one has to know someone or pay someone to get public service facilities. By extension, this little story is also instructive about dealing with grander situations, such as contracts and procurement, such as dealing with foreign investors, such as dealings with multinational corporations. Colleagues, it is my hope that this conference will refine our thoughts and strategies about the whole gamut of the anti-corruption industry in the Caribbean. Be it legal frameworks, investigations, litigation, asset recovery, be it money laundering, the financing of terrorism, the Bank Secrecy Act, beneficial ownership, unexplained wealth. In this conference, we must be engaged in sharing country reports, collaborating, cooperating, and focusing on synergy among jurisdictions and agencies. In our discourse, we will consider political will, the resourcing and the fostering of independence of anti-corruption agencies. In this fight, we must adopt the use of more technology and implement more e-business to promote greater efficiency, transparency, and accountability. We have to address the climate of fear that exists, the dearth of reporting, whistleblowing, bribery acts, and effecting them. We also have to consider behavioral change, education, both formal and incidental, as well as quelling societal norms that are insidious. We have to up the ante of stakeholders, from family at the basic level to NGOs and also to religious groups. And we have to have the support of the media and also embrace investigative journalism. Ladies and gentlemen, because of corruption, lives and livelihoods are at stake. And therefore we must press on. We cannot take a respite. Let us find solutions for our challenges, and let us not gloat over and sit on our laurels because of the successes we have had. Finally, Madam Chair, I'm not a bona fide diplomat, and so I'm not constrained by being prudent about what I say, especially in the use of comparatives and superlatives. I was here at this convention center yesterday. It was Sunday at that, to witness the completion of the physical arrangements for this conference. Ms. Kavita Bowani was the foreman. I know that since I last saw her, she has lost some weight. I don't know why. Madam Chair, I want to say, disregarding diplomatic language and any fear of retaliation, and having no fear of contradiction, that for the 5 conferences that I have attended, the arrangements here at the Arthur Chung Convention Center are the most exceptional. Thanks, Kavita. Thanks to your team, especially those who used their Sunday yesterday to come out here to prepare. Madam Chair, you have allowed me 5 minutes more than my time that was allotted. I thank you.
Thank you, Canon Mark Kendall, and welcome home.
Thank you.
The Commonwealth Secretariat must also be applauded for its unwavering support for the work of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. Now I kindly invite Dr. Roger Corentin to provide an overview of the conference, and I believe Dr. Corentin will also be introducing the Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Welcome, Dr. Corentin.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to associate myself with the protocol already established. However, I would like to acknowledge, for a very good reason, Honorable Gay Teixeira, MP, Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, and of course, all the ministers and the senior government officials present. Since from here I'll go back to my office, and my boss is here with me, I cannot escape that, because at the end of the day, I'll be with him back in England, London. So permit me also to acknowledge my own boss, Professor Louise Franceschi, Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and a person that I've known and worked with and come to admire, Canon McCandle, Chairman of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commission and Anti-Corruption Bodies. And of course, the Deputy Chair and substantively the Chairperson of the Integrity Commission of Grenada, Lady Trotman Joseph. And of course, all the heads of Integrity Commission and Anti-Corruption Bodies present. And I believe some of them are also listening to us virtually. Distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish to add a note of welcome to you all for honoring our invitation to be here with us today. I must say it is great pleasure for me to be here in Guyana for the very first time. A Caribbean country located in South America, and through my research, I got to know that this country around the world is known for your great rum, your cricket, good food, and music. I've seen the food. It's good. I've seen various Afro cuisine, Indian cuisine, the indigenous ones, and a whole lot. And I'm very comfortable with that. I must also say that I originally come from Ghana. And when I was young, we were receiving letters meant for Guyana, in Ghana, in Africa. So they were a confused shame between Ghana and Guyana, particularly those in US. If you go there now and you say Ghana, they say Guyana. If you say Guyana, they say Ghana. I don't know what is wrong with those across. Anyway, so I also realized that you have beautiful people, beautiful country, which is different. I see the greenish, the lush, the vegetation, the rivers. When the plane was landing, it was breathtaking. you have something you should keep. You don't want this concrete jungle. You have to maintain your ecotourism. It's a good one. It's different. You feel good. The breeze is fresh, no pollution. Then you have a beautiful culture. Madam Chair, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting mandates oblige the Commonwealth Secretariat to support member countries to develop and adopt measures and strategies to combat corruption and improve good governance, and strategies to combat corruption and improve the livelihood of its citizens. So to achieve this end, the Commonwealth Secretariat prioritized anti-corruption work to strengthen good governance through the corruption prevention and control, thereby promoting accountability and integrity in member countries. So, the Commonwealth Secretariat thus supported in-country inter-agency collaboration to deal with the issues of corruption by mobilizing all key institutions and other key stakeholders involved in monitoring, detecting, and responding to corruption and corrupt-related issues. So the decision to establish the Commonwealth Caribbean and Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies was to practicalize this mandate. And the association was born out in the conference in 2015 in Grenada. Because there's a belief that in the Commonwealth Secretariat, that cooperation among countries and its institutions was necessary in order to confront corruption, which has increasingly become national and international threat. So the practical value of this collaboration was in evidence in the last 80 years of this association existence. As the Integrity Commission and anti-corruption bodies learned and drew strength from one another and facilitated the transfer of best practice between Commonwealth countries in the Caribbean. This conference is an opportunity to focus, again, on the anti-corruption agenda in transforming the Commonwealth Caribbean countries. The conference provides a unique opportunity and platform for sharing experiences, frameworks, toolkits, insights, and country effort in the fight against corruption and the promotion of good governance in the Commonwealth Caribbean. We can all take pride in the fact that the Commonwealth countries in the region are making progress in strengthening their legal frameworks and in building their institutional capacity to tackle bribery and abuse of office. Integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies will share their work experience in areas where others identified as a key development need. And it is hoped that this will result in the selection of countries for benchmarking and peer learning, of course, and study trips. The regional conference offers each of us opportunity to take a renewed look at how our respective anti-corruption systems are working and trust that appropriate change, when necessary, will be made. A central part of the Commonwealth endeavor is to help member countries face up to corruption and tackle its destructive impact. And I must say, the Commonwealth member countries are generally doing relatively better than their non-Commonwealth countries. And it is true, and it is believed to a large extent due to the shared Commonwealth tradition and values of democracy, common law, public administration systems, and good governance. The Commonwealth is ideally placed in its strategic effort to foster genuine partnership among all member states. Its effectiveness is to build upon by the ownership, the collective ownership by its members, and the trust and confidence that member countries have in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And that has enabled the Secretariat to work on this important anti-corruption agenda for Commonwealth countries. Now, this high-level conference offers an experience sharing opportunities for all heads of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies and other public government officials to share experience and to learn from each other. The conference objectives will be achieved through a combination of presentations, group discussions, networking during and out of sessions. In terms of the conference overview, the conference program is in 4 parts. These are the opening ceremony as we are looking at to now. Then we have a 3-day technical sessions, number 2. The third part is 1-day sightseeing. And then the 4th part is our annual general meeting of the heads of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies. So, as you have noticed, this opening ceremony set the tone for the conference. As you have received the welcome message from Ms. Alicia Williams, Senior Compliance Officer, Financial Intelligence Unit, after we witnessed the procession of the flags. Then we have also witnessed already remarks by our Chairperson, Canon McCandle. Before Canon's remarks, we also received invocation by Joshan Crow, a student from Stanislaus College. The conference guest address will be delivered by our Professor Louis Franceschi, Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth. We will then have the opportunity to receive the keynote address by Honorable Gail Teixeira, MP, Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Governance. And of course, she will also give us, since he's the acting Prime Minister, he will give us the keynote address together. After that, we will have Ms. Lisa Hanuman, Legal Compliance Officer, Guyana Integrity Commission, who will honor us with a vote of thanks. I must say, we will be delighted with interludes of cultural presentations and renditions by the Guyana Police Force Band, as you have noticed. Thank you. We must, however, note that 7 p.m. tonight, that's my favorite, there will be a reception hosted by the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance. I'm looking forward to that. Then we move to the technical sessions, where the conference business is conducted. During the first 3 days, there will be a combination of presentations by the experts in various anti-corruption fields, panel discussions on sub-themes, and country report by jurisdictions, as well as networking in and out of sessions. I think the chairperson recounted most of the topic to be discussed, so I will not go over that, except to say that there will also be individual country reports or the individual anti-corruption country reports to complete the technical sessions among all the expert topics that we're going to listen. Then the next phase is all work and no play. Make a Jack a dull boy. So there will be a full day reserved for a sightseeing to explore the pristine beauty of Guyana, which I'm enthusiastically looking forward to. Unfortunately, my boss will not be here, so I'll give you a report. Back to office report. I'll paint the picture so vividly that you want to come back again. Then after that, there will be an annual general meeting, which is the final part of the conference program, where heads of Integrity Commission and anti-corruption bodies will discuss issues of interest to the association, select the country to host our next conference, and issue the conference communique. Madam Chair, the presence of the Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth at this meeting reaffirms Commonwealth Secretariat support to member countries' anti-corruption and good governance efforts. The Commonwealth Secretariat is committed to assist the Integrity Commission and anti-corruption bodies in the Commonwealth Caribbean with the financial and technical support to achieve meaningful and long-lasting efforts to combat corruption and to enhance good governance in the Caribbean region, as we have done over the past 8 years. So, Prof. Louis Franceschi, traveling non-stop for 2 days, from Friday, from India to Dubai, to New York, and to Guyana, and to Georgetown yesterday, just to come and support us, and to fly back tonight for another engagement in London tomorrow, is just amazing. And I think he deserves a good clap. Assistant Secretary General, on behalf of the Integrity Commission and anti-corruption bodies in the Commonwealth Caribbean, we thank you for your dedication, commitment, and continued support to the anti-corruption effort in the region. Colonel, you know, he is the one who approved the budget. So you have to be nice to him. He controls the purse, all the agencies, anti-corruption, everything. He is the person to be. If he says no, nothing happens. And he has always been saying yes. He has never disappointed me. So thank you. You see, I'm saying all this so that when he goes back, then I send the report, a request. Then he said, you remember what I said? Over there. If you know how to manage your boss, it's good. Anyway, so at this juncture, I have the honor to thank Honorable Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Governance for her leadership, hands-on approach to pull this conference off in the most outstanding manner that the chairman has already described. You can look at everything. It's amazing. Thank you for that, for being the driving force behind the conference. Unfortunately, he's not here for her to hear. I think he's gone out there. Still, he's doing hands-on over there also. So I'm sure it will be communicated, our message to her. I cannot conclude this my talk or brief speech without acknowledging the efficient and the effective work put together by the indefatigable Kavita for leading the organization of this conference. right from last year's conference in St. Kitts and Nevis, when after the conference I tasked her to explore with the Honorable Minister for the possibility for Guyana hosting this year's conference. Kavita kept faith with me and has worked day and night to deliver this conference with her team. Kavita, if you are here, I'm so sorry for putting you under intense pressure when the going got tough. We have our argument, we have our discussions, but you are an amazing lady. Your calm personality and composure is a blessing not only to your ministry, but you are an asset to your government and your country. It's one of the best I've ever worked with. Calm, composure, even when it's under intense pressure. And me, I'm a taxi-driven person, so you can know how I drive things. So thank you, Kavita, for that. I think you deserve another applause. Thank you. Finally, not the least, all the delegates and invited guests, thank you very much for responding to our invitation. My hope and prayer is that the association will continue to grow from strength to strength as we strive to control and reduce corruption in the Caribbean. I look forward to this exciting conference. And finally, I thank you.
Thank you for that detailed overview, Dr. Corentin. I can see, in fact, I had a chance to glimpse the agenda for the conference, and it is indeed a packed agenda. But it's good to see that there's something fit in there for distinguished delegates to experience Guyana outside these conference walls. So we look forward to that trip, and we look forward to the dinner as well. I want to at this time acknowledge the delegates of the association who are joining us, I'm told, virtually. So welcome wherever. I don't see a camera or the screen or anything, but I just want you to know that you're welcome to these proceedings as well, delegates. At this time, I will invite the Honorable Professor Louis Franceschi to give his remarks. Thank you.
Good morning. Honorable Minister Gail Teixeira, Chairperson and Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, Canon Mark Kendall, Chairperson, Lady Trotman Joseph, Deputy Chairperson of CAICAB, Excellencies, Honorable and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As we usually say in Africa, and this has extended now across the world, all protocols observed. I bring you warm greetings from the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, KC, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, who could not be here for the same reason I almost did not manage to come. I do not know if what I had just had was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, but here I am. And the Secretary General said, please, you have to make it no matter what, because she had a meeting today, actually, in Los Angeles and going to Sydney. Yesterday she was with the Ministers of Finance of the Commonwealth, and of course she could not somehow split herself into two. I would like to begin by doing something I have never done before, that is to start with a poem, and it's a poem composed by a brilliant poet on honesty, and it says, "Honesty is a virtue rare and true, a shining light to guide us through. It speaks the truth no matter how hard, and never plays a deceitful card. It stands tall like an oak tree, unyielding to dishonesty. It's a beacon of hope for those who struggle to cope. Honesty may be tough to bear, but it's a burden we must all share. For the truth may hurt, but it heals, and with it the heart feels. It's a foundation for love and for truth and love, a gift sent from the heavens above. For honesty is the way to lead a life with purpose and grace. So let us embrace honesty and let it be our guide, for only through truthfulness we can truly abide. Anti-corruption refers to honesty, to the efforts and actions taken to prevent, detect, and combat corruption. And corruption is the abuse of power in positions for personal gain. Anti-corruption measures promote transparency, strengthen governance institutions, implementing codes of conduct and ethical standards, and prosecuting and punishing corrupt officials and individuals. And corruption distorts market competition, undermining public trust and institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just lied to you and to myself. This poem was not composed by a wonderful, famous, brilliant poet. It was done by ChatGPT in 3 seconds. The whole poem about honesty by ChatGPT. I wrote, please write for me a poem on honesty, and the poem came. And the description of corruption that I just read was written by ChatGPT in 2 seconds. That's what artificial intelligence is doing today. It's an incredible tool, a powerful tool for good or for evil, for truth or deceit. And actually, this is why anti-corruption efforts have to style up and be up the game, because the evildoers are going ahead in incredible ways. If you pass this poem and this text I just read to you by Turnitin, which is one of the best anti-plagiarism programs used in all universities across the world, it will say it's 100% original. This has no author but Louis Franceschi, and Louis Franceschi did not do it, but did it through ChatGPT. Is this bad? Well, it's morally neutral. It all depends on the use we make of those systems. But certainly, as you know, and it happens with corruption, money laundering, drug trafficking, etc., the evil in this world and in governments and in private sector and the civil society and in all our institutions finds its ways like water through the cracks. And that's why we have to seal all the cracks. And that's what this fantastic and wonderful network that has been put together, thanks to the work of Grenada and all of you in the Caribbean, with the little support we can give from the Commonwealth, is doing, trying to seal all those gaps to make sure that corruption never sets in as a form of life, as it has happened in many countries. I'm very happy to note what Roger just said, that corruption indexes in the Commonwealth countries are doing anti-corruption indexes are doing much better than in non-Commonwealth countries. This is a reason for us to rejoice, but it's also a reason of concern, because we are here also to help our brothers and sisters from the region who are not in the Commonwealth or part of this family. So AI is really giving us new openings, for better or for worse, and the lack of framework legislation to deal with digital assets, which are also expanding incredibly fast, is a must. We had a meeting with the law ministers of the Commonwealth in Mauritius last November, and they asked the Secretariat to write a framework legislation for digital assets. It's something that we do not have anywhere. Some countries have come up with it, but there are no standards. And we do not want the European Union, for example, to come up with standards that would benefit just the European Union. But we need standards that function across the whole world, and that's a beautiful target. We know what happens with global corruption. $3.6 trillion each year seem to be lost to corruption, according to the UN. The global proceeds from criminal activities estimated at between 1 and 1.6 trillion per year. Corrupt money associated with bribes received by public officials is estimated at 20 to 40 billion per year. And of course, that figure is perhaps twice or 3 times the ODA development assistance given, for example, in Africa, and many more times the one given to the Caribbean or to the Pacific. It's a real pandemic, and well, we have to do our best. The eyes are on the public sector, but really the bribes are usually coming from the private sector, and that's a huge challenge, because we are trying to fight corruption like we fought, for example, drug trafficking. You are not dealing with production, but consumption. So by fighting anti-corruption in government, we are dealing with consumption, but the root comes from production. This is why this conference and this meeting of heads is so important, resetting the anti-corruption agenda. Well, we have all lived through COVID. Some of us, some of you, some of those who should have been here are not here because did not make it. And sometimes it's tragic what happened. I know of a health minister who died because of COVID. And in his country, money had been stolen in huge amounts that were supposed to go to COVID recovery and COVID measures and vaccines. And so, well, that money that was stolen by people perhaps in his ministry killed him. And this can happen to any of us. Benchmarks are available online. Sorry, we have done this support to anti-corruption bodies in the region by having a 3-legged approach, like the African stool that, well, I'm from Kenya, so research, capacity building, and network. That's what we have used. Research. The Commonwealth created anti-corruption benchmarks, which is a huge resource, fantastic, that can make you how you are doing and what you have to change. Dr. Corentin tells me that boxes of the anti-corruption benchmarks have been shipped to this conference. It's also available online. Make use of it. It will help. Capacity building, training centers, manual, audits, peer review. There are incredible things being done by India, Bangladesh, and Singapore on e-government systems to cut the possibility of getting cartels in between. Well, it's worth finding out. We are collecting all this information. Bangladesh is ready to give all these packages, government packages, they have built for free for small and developing countries. And some of those small countries cannot pay. I mean, it's difficult to code a package for 100,000 people or 1 million people when they have done it for 200, 300, India for 1.4 billion. So that's what we are doing in the Commonwealth, learning from all these experiences. We asked the UK, what have you done with the judiciary? Wow, this is a good experience. This was bad. Okay, let's avoid it. What have you done in India, Bangladesh, Singapore, Australia, Guyana, Rwanda, Kenya, etc. And then we go learning from good and bad experiences to make it better. We also have established with Grenada a Center of Excellence to enable the Commonwealth Secretariat to deliver key capacity building programs for institutions in the country and in the region. Thank you for your great support. Networking, establishing such conferences. Time is not wasted here. A lot of learning happens. This is a meeting of brains coming together. The network promotes collaboration and exchange among member countries and practitioners. Just as Patricia Scotland says, the Secretary General, every dollar lost to corruption is a dollar lost to investing in a child's education, healthcare, which is much needed, and infrastructure. In Kenya, we did a study some time ago, and we realized that if money was not lost to corruption, a state-of-the-art cancer center with MRI machines and incredible, it could be set up in each of the 47 counties in the country. I mean, it's amazing. Or you could actually somehow give all the schools computers for each and every child, and electricity and water and for a whole year. Well, really, that's what's happening with corruption. We are stealing. When it is stolen, it's a stealing of the money that could go to a child's education, to health, to things that will help us survive. And I was telling some group of politicians, you see, sometimes the money for health is stolen, you have an accident, and it doesn't matter who you are. You will be taken to the nearest hospital, public center, facility, and of course you may die there because the money that was supposed to go there, to that place, in drugs, facilities, doctors, nurses, was stolen. So anyway, it's a very interesting and challenging situation. But we have champions, like each of you, and like Dr. Roger Corentin, head of the public sector governance in the Commonwealth. Now that he was sending so many things on my site and saying how much I may have done and supported him, really, we support where we see value. And he just won the latest Fighting Corruption Award given by TEMIS, an international award which recognizes those going above in the fight against corruption. So huge congratulations, Roger, for this award. And of course, he did not get it alone. He got it because you are behind him, and you are supporting him and giving him encouragement and producing the result that tells the world he's doing something right, which is really doing it on your behalf. Well, the World Bank Control of Corruption data confirms that the Caribbean Commonwealth countries perform better than non-Caribbean Commonwealth countries. This is a huge responsibility, as I said before. As we move beyond the halfway mark in achieving the SDGs, there is an urgent need for all governments to put in place effective execution, monitoring, and evaluation structures for the SDG implementations. Well, in the Commonwealth, we have a number of toolkits to help, but the work of fighting corruption has to be done by each country, by each government, by each civil society organization. And we all have to be transparent in ways that give example, that help, and build that culture of integrity. Collaboration is essential. That's what you are all doing here. And I would like to leave you with 4 challenges. One is institutionalization. To institutionalize, strengthen institutions that are fighting corruption, that are working for good governance, and find the ways to do it. 2, investigative journalism. Important. Investigative journalism has suffered a lot in the world when the social media came up, because the media houses lost the money, the income they had to pay good investigative journalists to do their work. Of course, this is not just the 140 or 50 characters of a tweet, but something that is investigated in depth. And we know the damage somehow social media superficiality has caused in governance. Why? Because with 150 characters, they can destroy something that has been built for years. And usually the Twitter approach is very abusive, very direct, very personalized. Well, that's a huge challenge for us, and we have to do it better. We have to think out of the box. Then fighting impunity through wealth declarations, also private sector accountability, civil society, everyone should be accountable to make it fashionable. And of course, the judiciary has to be backing us, backing you up with fighting lack of accountability or impunity. And fourth, innovation, campaigns, make the fight attractive, nice. I mean, make people see that honesty is worth more than corruption. And this is the usual drama in our countries. Corruption is cheaper than honesty. It should not be there like that. As soon as we make corruption more expensive than honesty, then we will be going the right way. And things will happen, because being honest will be worthwhile. We have to also count on those practical aspects of this fight. Well, make this 9th Commonwealth Caribbean Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies Conference a true landmark in the fight against corruption in this beautiful region. The conference in Grenada was an incredible push for this network. Well, let's make this conference in Guyana, in Georgetown, the next step in implementation. We cannot guarantee success, but we guarantee failure by giving up. That's not an option. Do not give up. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Franceschi, for your message. Again, we truly appreciate the support by the Commonwealth Secretariat when it comes to the work of the Commonwealth Association of Caribbean bodies. It's a pity that AI thing that you spoke of couldn't assist with physical work. I'm sure it would have made Kavita's work very easy in preparation for this opening and the conference overall. Without further ado, I have the pleasure of inviting our very own Minister Gail Teixeira, MP, Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, and also the chairperson of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption and the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. I'm not going to mention that bit about her performing the functions of the Prime Minister because she don't like to hear that. So I invite you, Honorable Minister, this time. Welcome for your address.
Can one of the technicians help here? I'm 5 feet. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cannon. You understand these things. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to Guyana, our friends from the Caribbean. We know that we're the bottom of the train line, as they say. So when you get on the line from Miami, we're the bottom. And so, as you know, as you go along a train, things break down, weather changes, and so some of our delegates came in, instead of around, I think, 10 o'clock last night, they came in around 1:32 this morning. So thank you very much for braving it, and to coming here and looking so fresh. So thank you, we appreciate that. And of course, I'm always pleased to have the Chancellor and the Speaker wherever we go, the two heads of the 3 branches of government. And so, Madam Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, we're very pleased to have you here. And of course, we joined this organization with the Integrity Commission in 2015, but as a Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, a new body, in 2020 we were formed, and so 2021 we set up this National Coordinating Committee to try to see how do we manage reporting and monitoring and follow up on the conventions that we've signed. We're all small countries with not large populations, large bureaucracies, large skill bases, and so we created a coordinating body to look at what are the commitments under the convention, Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, and the UN Convention Against Corruption. Of course, we've been a member of the OAS Inter-American Convention for now 20-odd years, and it is the oldest anti-corruption convention in the world. And so we are now in our 6th cycle of reporting. So this coming together of these 16 agencies was to try to see how, first of all, to teach the agencies what were the conventions about, what they're dealing with, how do we have to report, and what is it required to do, as well as to get those recommendations up to ministers, up to the cabinet, so there is follow-up. And so that has been an experiment we're working with, including having training workshops and so on. But I wanted to talk today about some issues that may be more than just what we're doing, because we'll do that in the conference, what we've been doing, what our challenges are, and assessments and so on. But a couple of things I want to say today, some of which may not be very palatable, but I think that we have to say it. The Caribbean countries keep getting notoriety in the media, international media, for havens of corruption. And the number of articles that are printed showing that we have a massive corruption in the Caribbean islands. And we have to be offended by that as CARICOM countries. We have to be offended by that. And how is that done? It is done by using the TI CPI, the Corruption Perception Indices. And I, as a Guyanese and as a member of the government, we do not accept TI's assessment of us. It is non-empirical, it is not scientific, and therefore we do not feel it's its value that an organization can have 2 or 3 unnamed persons in a country evaluate your country and put your country on a scale globally. That gives 2 or 3 people an enormous amount of power that they weren't given by the electorate, they weren't given by the people. And so what we have is this issue in the world globally of the difference between the South and the North, if we look at the equator as the waste. And that is that, how is it in the democracy index that the majority of democracy index shows that the world on the northern side is more democratic and the southern side is not? How is it that the CPI of the TI points that the southern part of the world is more corrupt than the others? Isn't that rather coincidental? And for me, this is a reflection of prejudices and biases against persons in the developing world. We have at this conference to remedy some of those images of our countries. And part of that is being frontal in what we're doing. What are the challenges we face? What are the things we need to help us do better? And to let our people know, instead of integrity commissions being in this background, checking everybody's declaration, and anti-corruption bodies doing what they have to do, we have to go out and explain to our people what are the anti-corruption measures of our countries, what are the challenges we face, and to get our people on board to support the efforts. And that's why, for me, this conference is important, and based on the theme. We have to look at our achievements, we have to look at our challenges, and we have to look at how do we overcome those challenges. It's not enough to say we have challenges. When we deal, and I want to go back to the democracy issue. The developing countries, and particularly those of us in the Caribbean here, we are not even 100 years old with independence. We're not even 100 years old in independence. And small countries, small populations, in some cases, same gene pool. In Guyana, our gene pool is more diverse. But in some countries, the gene pool may be descend from 2 or 3 families. And that poses challenges for anti-corruption, obviously. Everyone is one big family. And so these are the realities of our lives, of our countries, and we mustn't be ashamed to say that these are some of the challenges affecting us. And how are we going to manage this? How are we going to improve? How are we going to deal with it? Instead of getting battered all the time, and as my friend, the Assistant Secretary General pointed out, that with, 150 what's that, 150 clicks, a whole country, a whole government can be overthrown, can be removed. A person's personal life could be destroyed, and you can't do anything about it, really. And so we have to recognize that democracy is the foundation of our countries. The democratic institutions, and our countries are not old. Many of us, like Guyana, a number of us, are embryonic, nascent democracies that are emerging with a very traumatic history. Others have had it easier, but still, democracy, the length of democracy in these countries and democracy building is like a grain of sand in the ocean. In comparison to, say, United States, 300 years. Britain claims to have 1,000 years, for example. And so we have to be able to look at, first of all, ensuring that the democratic institutions and structures of our country are in order, and to build them, to build the capacity of them. When my friend Canon Kendall, I'm very delighted that you gave the experience of Guyana. Thank you very much for sharing this, because we as politicians get the bad news. We don't often hear good news, so thank you, Canon Kendall. But the issue of trying to work in the public service to ensure that the bureaucracy understands how they deal with the public, that they're servants of the public, and therefore honesty and treating with respect is part of the code of the public service. The same thing when we come to how the private sector functions and civil society functions. And therefore this movement of democracy that has emerged in our countries over various lengths of time are still in progress. They still have not, in my view, matured. They're not mature democracies. And therefore, those are challenges that put effect on our institutions, our judiciary, our legislature, our public service, the private sector, the maturity of the civil society organizations in our countries. And how are we going to deal with that? Because for me, when one has strong democratic institutions that are efficient, that are professional, that are doing their mandate according to the constitutional law, you have less opportunities for corruption, less avenues for corruption. And therefore, the issue of governance and ensuring that we have efficient services, that everyone has equitable access to goods and services, that people can go to get a passport, they can go to get certain functions done without feeling that they are being pushed around and therefore give something under the table to get it done. And so the issue of strengthening the institutions, whether it's integrity commissions, whether it's the public service, looking at the private sector laws and accountability, looking at the civil society laws and accountability, this is part, to me, of not just anti-corruption, but in fact building resilient democratic nations that can deal with these issues. And so I think sometimes we isolate anti-corruption as a, how do you say, as a component that has to be treated separately. To me, in my view, it is a comprehensive issue that builds into the democratic frameworks, to have anti-corruption frameworks, to be able to build it into sustainable development so that we're reducing poverty, we're improving access to goods and services of our people, no matter what part of the country they live in. And so these are all intertwined. And that's why I said that resetting our agenda and looking at what have we achieved in the region and as members of the Commonwealth. How do we grow our organization? Should we go to other countries, other organizations to join the Commonwealth Caribbean Association? And also, what help do we need? We have here today representatives of the UN and World Bank and IDB and stuff like that. And sometimes countries we have to look at, do we need technical support? Sometimes in our countries the population is small and there's just so much you can do. I don't know how countries that have small populations of less than 200,000 are able to keep up to date with the UN conventions on human rights and anti-corruption. For me, in a ministry in a country that's larger, it's a constant daily issue. And I have a small ministry, but we have quite a sizable bureaucracy in Guyana. I don't know how some of the countries manage. When we look at, and I just want to say that the involvement of people in the anti-corruption struggle is very important. And how do we involve people? There are a number of ways and experiences that have been tried. There was in Guyana a few years ago, we had I Paid a Bribe Guyana, which was a website people could go on and say that the policeman had stopped them and asked them for something, or a contractor, etc. It became a very useful tool for the government. And so we have to look at, do we use those kind of mechanisms? You have the Crime Stoppers that are in existence in some countries in the region. You also have an involvement of people at a very grassroots level. I don't know about you, but I know in Guyana, in every village of Guyana, every community of Guyana, there's some elderly person, senior citizen, who is watching like a hawk from his veranda, from his back step, what they're doing with the road, how much sand, how much gravel, how long they work, whether they took too many breaks and drink and stuff like that. The eyes and ears concept of anti-corruption is an important component, and we don't value it enough. Some of the contractors or some of the even technicians feel, oh Lord, he's a pain in the you-know-what. He's calling again to complain about you-know-what. But we have to give credence to these persons who do recognize the value of money. And they do recognize that if the road is done well, they won't have a trouble in the next 5-10 years. If it's done badly, in another year or two, it's gone. And so how do we involve people in to be the eyes and ears of not only the government, of the private sector, to ensure that people are getting value for their money, that taxpayers' money is being utilized for their benefit, and that they're not being siphoned off and making someone else wealthy. So we have to look at what kind of interactions, interventions, innovations to reward and to recognize the community. You know, you have now on the phones, what's called citizen reporters. I think we need citizen anti-corruption reporters, and to give that credibility and importance. Of course, as the ASG reported on the issue of investigative journalism. There's some very good websites, blog sites that do serious work, and we have to be able to also develop our capacities in our country. The strengthening of institutions, and if you look at Guyana's framework, which we released last year and is circulated again this year, the issue of the constitutional bodies and strengthening them, whether it's the judiciary, with the justice sector programs, whether it is the Auditor General's office in terms of having adequate resources, both human and financial, whether it's the Public Procurement Commission that's been recently reappointed. These are constitutional bodies that have protection, and therefore how are they able to function to the best of their ability? The statutory bodies, in terms of, every time I drink a water bottle in front of a crowd, I think of the famous shot they did of Trump drinking water out of a bottle, and I think, oh God, please don't tell me I'm doing that. But so I look at the tape afterwards and hope I didn't do that. But the investigative issues of strengthening the prosecutorial arms, the prosecutorial services, to make sure that we not only have enough prosecutors, but investigators, strengthening the Serious Organized Crime Unit, the CANU, for example, the Custom Anti-Narcotic Unit, the DPP's office, for example, to strengthen the judiciary to make sure that we can get through cases in an expeditious and efficient manner. Because all of this is part of trust building. If our people don't trust the institutions, they're not going to share information with you. No matter how much whistleblower legislation you pass, they're just not going to. So part of what we're doing is to build trust that the institutions work, they work fairly and transparently. And that's an important challenge for us. I hope that in closing, that some of these thoughts may be of use for our discussions. But I hope out of this conference we will feel a little more confident to be able to say in a communique at the end, this is what we're doing. This is what we have been doing as an organization and in our countries. And that these are the things we're going to be working on. So that, and make it public, make it known to our people, so that people begin to feel this is just not a bunch of guys traveling and they come back and they don't tell us anything. It's important, I think, with all of us that when we go back to our countries, to try to have a television program, so to explain to people that they know what you're doing. Transparency and accountability isn't only to do with putting government information on websites, Parliament, exposing all these things. We have to go a little further step in terms of making sure that information is available. Guyana is one of the few national procurement tender administrations, as far as I know, that is public, that all the tenders are open publicly with the witness of the media, and that during COVID they did it virtually and continue to do that, and that we have a website where you can go and see what are the minutes to do with the award of the contracts, as well as vacancies, or what you call new contracts being advertised, as well as what contracts have been issued to whom for what kind of money. So the whole issue of being more transparent and accountable all the time is critical, and that also we have to sometimes assume that the public knows all this and they recognize it. Unfortunately, the media and some of the Facebooks do not give that credence, do not give the kind of information available to our people. But I believe that the more people are involved, the participation of people through various means, and we have to devise those means that will attract them to be participants, or the quiet participation of those who give information, like I said, the citizen observer in the village, for example, in the community. We have to devise that using our culture. Our culture is different in the regions, in different countries, but similar. We all come historically, ancestrally, from village cultures, ancestrally. And therefore we understand some of the parochial dynamics of village culture. And how do we use that to enhance the campaign to end corruption, to reduce corruption and the opportunities for it. I believe that the more public we are, the more we put on websites, the more government information is available, the private sector putting up on their websites their company documents that can be put up, and the civil society. Coming out of a workshop last year with the private sector and the civil society and the government on anti-corruption, we're amending, and we'll start a process of consultation on amending the civil registration for civil society organizations. The law we have is very old, and also the private sector looking at the Companies Act, etc., to see if there are lacunas there that need to be addressed. And so in that way, out of a workshop, out of discussions, have come two innovations that will lead to legislative amendment. So I hope that the experience of Guyana will be interesting to you, and that we hope too that when you're here, your site visit in the Essequibo River, we will take you to two rivers, Essequibo and Mazaruni. We wanted to take you three, the Cayuni, but time, and we don't want you on the river too late. But I hope you will drink in the fresh air of Guyana and the hospitality of our people. We are known, even when we were in our worst times, as the hospitable people. And the last lick on all of this, of course, is that when we deal with corruption, we deal with a very limited view of corruption in terms of procurement and bribery and tips and weapons and money laundering, etc. But anti-corruption also relates to fighting and protecting democracy. That those who wish to reduce, remove perverse democracy are our enemies with corruption as well. And therefore the worst forms of corruption are those who wish to steal the right of our people in any country to vote and put in a government that they elected. And that must be the honor and the benchmark of when we're talking about corruption, not just what are the easier things. The contractors are guilty, the public servants taking bribe, the police breaking bribe. But we also have to deal with what are bigger issues in some of our countries. So welcome, enjoy Guyana, and we hope that you'll come back after this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for that interesting and thought-provoking address. We expected nothing less of you. Now we're going to have our cultural presentation. Guyana has a rich and diverse cultural heritage, as you've already heard. Our dances, food, and arts brought here by our foreparents from various parts of the world have evolved into a unique tapestry which we call our own and are proud to share with you today. This presentation that we have shortly is a microcosm of Guyanese cultural experience through dance, spoken words, drumming, and song. It features performances by Daniela Arejo, Calvin Barnett and Nikita, Barbie's Delight Dancers, Riverside Angel Dancers, the National Dance Company, Supreme Casa Group, and Drum for Life. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy a taste of Guyana as we welcome our performers.
One quick right now.
draped in an irresistible combination of breathtaking and enchanting beauty. Guyana is an evergreen paradise, the land of many waters and home to the holy cradle, golden city of El Dorado. Nestled to the northern coast, Guyana is South America's greatest treasure. A perfect ambience for nature lovers, eco-tourists, and adventure seekers, bursting with countless possibilities, unmatched flora and fauna, and giant species that hide in our pristine Amazonia rainforest, an unthinkable diversity where our anteaters, jaguars, capuchin monkeys, and harpy eagles roam freely. Deep within the green heart of Guyana lies the mighty CAICACB Falls. This 743 feet falls is the largest single drop waterfall in the world. Its natural wonder pours into the verdant, permanently mist-covered river below, the CAICACB River. Now journey with me through Guyana's capital city, Georgetown, the home to the tall, Gothic-style St. George's Cathedral, the largest wooden building in all the Caribbean. A clock towers above our starboard market. This area is easily the busiest such place in the city, always bustling with people and activities. Experience our many restaurants and nightlife spots, all in the heart of Georgetown. Or take a stroll on the seawall
now time for a featured address. I have the honor of inviting the Honorable Ashmi Singh, Member of Parliament, who will be presenting the featured address in behalf of His Excellency the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Alicia. For those in the audience who've been sitting here now for more than 2 hours, in case you are alarmed at the prospect of a feature address now being rolled out at you, and particularly if you know my reputation for brevity, I assure you that it is my intention only to give a few remarks, not least because my task has been aided so considerably by the addresses that have been given before us. Let me, of course, first of all acknowledge the presence and remarkable leadership of the Acting Prime Minister, and my distinguished colleague, Minister Gail Teixeira, who, as we have heard from everybody who has spoken before, has played an instrumental role in putting together this important regional event and continues to provide outstanding leadership within our government on the entire governance and parliamentary affairs agenda. So Gail, congratulations. I heard many accolades assigned to you, and I'd like to associate I think a round of applause is perfectly justifiable. But in particular, thank you very much for accommodating me on this occasion. Let me also, in the interest of transparency, say very clearly that when I got the request to speak at today's event in the place of Prime Minister Mark Phillips, I immediately said that if I'm going to be speaking after Gail Teixeira on this subject matter, I have serious doubts about how much value I would be adding. And so I say that as I share with you that caveat at the very onset, just in case at the end of my remarks, you yourself are contemplating what value I added after Gail Teixeira would have spoken before me. But let me also acknowledge, of course, the presence of the Chancellor of the Judiciary, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Head of Governance in the Commonwealth Secretariat, distinguished delegates from across the Commonwealth Caribbean, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of government agencies, including very important constitutional agencies in Guyana, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me, first of all, on behalf of His Excellency the President of Guyana, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, and on behalf of Prime Minister Mark Phillips and the entire government of Guyana, permit me to join Minister Teixeira in welcoming all of you who are visiting Guyana, and in particular those of you who are visiting Guyana for the very first time, and permit me to welcome back home those of you who are returning home, and I note in particular Canon Kendall in this regard. Welcome to Guyana. I often feel that being placed immediately after a cultural item is a little bit of a setup, because if one comes immediately after as energetic a cultural presentation as the one that immediately preceded me, I can only be inevitably and unavoidably an anticlimax. But you would have witnessed the beautiful diversity of Guyana, the beautiful and remarkable richness of diverse Guyana, a diversity that we celebrate for the oneness that we have managed to forge over the centuries of our happy coexistence and our happy interaction and the melding and forging of a beautiful and single unified Guyanese identity built on the foundation of this beautiful diversity that you would have just witnessed. More particularly in relation to the subject of this conference, We consider it a great privilege to be able to host the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, not least because we consider the work of these integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies as an extremely important part, or as an extremely important elements of the more comprehensive architecture for good governance in our respective countries. And we welcome this opportunity because we are in Guyana, I believe, justifiably proud of the remarkable progress that we have made as a country in strengthening our governance architecture. And I have no doubt that during the course of the next few days you will hear elements of this, and Minister Teixeira will of course be best placed to articulate this in its fullness. And time certainly wouldn't permit me to articulate it even nearly as fully as it deserves. But if one were to consider Guyana as a laboratory or experiment setting for building institutions of state, I believe we would present an absolutely interesting case study, because we come from a legacy where the fundamental institutions of democracy had been eroded to the point where nobody any longer even challenges this narrative, and where for a number of years our country endured undemocratic rule, which is something that cannot be ignored in the spectrum of governance and anti-corruption. And Minister Teixeira said this very, very eloquently, and I might wish to reiterate it for emphasis only. And we came from a history and legacy where we were an undemocratic country in the 1970s, 1980s, and early 1990s, which resulted in the complete decimation of every institution of state. It is now no longer even debated. It is now a well-established fact of history that there was a time in Guyana's history during that time when the flag of the political party in government was hoisted in the forecourts of the Supreme Court. And without elaborating on that period excessively this morning, it brought with it the erosion of democracy, the destruction of the institutions of good governance, the decimation of the institutions of state, inevitably brought with them economic destruction, to the point that I don't believe any of our regional brothers and sisters would dispute, and all of you remember this period when Guyana almost became a pariah state. And my Caribbean brothers and sisters recall the days when Guyanese visitors were viewed with great suspicion when they arrived at their respective airports, because they were automatically assumed to be economic migrants or economic refugees. And it took a lot of work, including with the support of our international partners, and I see some of them in the room today, first of all, to restore democracy, which came eventually in 1992. To start progressively to rebuild the institutions of state, an independent judiciary, other independent watchdogs, including for purposes of accountability, etc. And to restore a functioning, viable economy, and to bring our country back from the brink of bankruptcy. It took considerable effort, one, to make Guyana a destination that was attractive for international investment. Today, a lot is said about Guyana's good economic fortunes. Those good economic fortunes did not happen by luck or chance or happenstance. There was a time when no international company would have come to do business in Guyana. And it took hard work to make us be able to present ourselves once again as a credible destination for international investors. And that work was embarked upon in the early 90s and through the start of the current century. And it encompassed literally every facet of the governance architecture. It encompassed constitutional reform, which led to a significantly rewritten, not a completely discarded and brand new constitution, but a significantly rewritten constitution in 2001 that included several fundamental provisions, constitutional provisions, that go to the core of good governance. They included the institution of presidential term limits, which we did not have before. They included the establishment of a number of constitutional commissions, including the writing into the Constitution of the establishment of a public procurement commission, recognizing how important public procurement is to the public accountability spectrum. They included the establishment of special select committees within the standing select, sectoral select committees within the Parliament to provide parliamentary oversight of various aspects of government operations, including things like social services, foreign relations, etc. They included provisions aimed at strengthening the independence of the National Audit Office, and enhancing the mandate of the Public Accounts Committee and placing that office under the direct oversight and supervision of this Public Accounts Committee with a newly enhanced mandate. And the list goes on. We also enacted into our local or national legislation important statutes, like the statute that would establish the Integrity Commission, the statute that would articulate the framework for fighting money laundering and the financing of terrorism and lead to the establishment of the Financial Intelligence Unit, now a member of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. Legislation overhauling our public financial management framework, including a brand new Fiscal Management and Accountability Act and a brand new Audit Act. And here again, the list goes on. We also, having put in place those various constitutional and legal prerequisites, set about the important task of developing the institutional capacity to discharge the important responsibilities that devolved from this new legal framework. And I could similarly list the many tremendous successes that we've recorded in this regard. But suffice it to say that we are under no illusion in Guyana that our work is done or nearly done. In fact, we are reinforced in our conviction that what we have achieved thus far represents work in progress. And we continue to be committed to further strengthening this legal framework and indeed further enhancing the supreme law of our land, the Constitution. In fact, we have committed to launching a second wave of constitutional reforms. And we're in the process of setting up and launching the work of a Constitutional Reform Commission, which will see further revisions to our Constitution, taking stock of our experience, our collective experience since the 2001 amendments. And so that has already been launched. We're also constantly looking at ways in which we can further enhance the legal framework. Just a few days ago, we were speaking about how critical issues related to data protection is. And of course, data protection and data integrity go to the core, equally, of good governance and of an environment that is conducive to a quality citizen experience and being able to benefit from all of the advantages that derive from initiatives such as digitalization. And I was very pleased, ASG, to hear you speak of digitalization, because in fact it was something that, had you not opened the subject, I might have done so myself. Equally, in addition to our commitment to doing the second wave of constitutional reforms and further enhancements to our legal framework, our work to strengthen institutions and build capacity continues apace. And I want to add my voice to Minister Teixeira's voice and to say unequivocally on behalf of President Ali and his entire government, to say that this government is firmly committed to putting in place an institutional architecture for good governance that assures that we will be able, first of all, not only to subscribe to all of the international norms to which we have affixed our signatures and affixed our national commitments, but equally a good governance framework that will redound ultimately to the benefit and well-being of all of the Guyanese people. That is our firm and unequivocal commitment. But I want, on this occasion, to share with you 3 or 4 particular thoughts, and 1 or 2 of them might be slightly repetitive, so I will not elaborate on them, or elaborate on them excessively. Minister Teixeira spoke of one, and Gail, with your permission, I would like to reiterate it. We cannot view the work of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies as somehow a silo or a self-contained agenda, isolated and separated from the broader agenda for good governance. And Gail said it far more eloquently than I possibly can. We cannot want, if we hold ourselves out, and I'm not speaking here to the integrity commissions because this perhaps is not your role, or indeed the anti-corruption bodies, depending on who you are. But civil society also has an important role to play in all of this. And we cannot want to climb the mountain of and ascend high moral ground on the matter of one public procurement contract or one allegation of a mid-level public official accepting inducement, all of which is completely unacceptable incidentally. But we cannot want to climb the mount and ascend high ground and pontificate on corruption when we hear a rumor of a contract that was awarded by some process that is perceived not to be inconsistent with the law, and then turn around and in the same breath be completely silent on an attempt to steal an election. The two don't go with each other. Because the ultimate theft is the theft of the voter's right, the citizen's right. The ultimate theft is the theft of the citizen's right to elect a government of their choice. And when we speak of issues of accountability and corruption and good governance, We cannot want to pretend to hold the high ground, whoever we may be, selectively, and be silent, like I said, pontificate selectively, and selectively be silent on the obvious and the blatant. The spectrum of corruption spans from, and it's perhaps significant that I'm speaking in this room, because this was the room where the recount of Guyana's 2020 election, this building was the building in which Guyana's 2020 election, the recount eventually took place. Incidentally, you might be astonished to hear 5 months, was it 5 months after the election? 5 months after the election, a recount finally took place. Most of you in the Caribbean know you have an election, and in 2 days, the government demits office and a new government comes into office. This is the very building in which the recount took place 5 months belatedly after Guyana's 2020 election. And so, the first point that I want to repeat for emphasis is that the work that you do comprises a part, albeit an extremely important and indispensable part, of the broader framework for governance and for good governance. And I emphasize an extremely important part. We must, not only as elected officials or public officials, appointed or otherwise, or indeed as civil society, we must as citizens commit ourselves to good governance at all levels. And corruption includes, like I said, it spans the whole spectrum. At one end, attempting to steal an election, and at another end, a low-level public official, I shouldn't say low-level, that's probably a disrespectful term, a junior policeman stopping a motor car for suspected speeding and appearing slightly willing to accept some inducement not to issue a speeding ticket. One might like to situate those two at the two ends of the spectrum. But you can't selectively berate the policeman. And I'm not saying he should not, or policemen should not be berated. They should be berated, because citizens should not be subject to that kind of treatment and harassment. But you can't want to pontificate on the entry-level policeman turning a blind eye to issuing a speed ticket, and you're silent on an attempt to steal an election. The second point I wish to make, and I guess to wrap that point up, I urge that we all as citizens recommit ourselves to good governance in the most holistic and comprehensive sense. The second point I wish to make, and here again Minister Teixeira spoke about this point, and many of you would be able to relate to this. The peculiar challenges faced by small states. The peculiar challenges faced by small states. You know, in some audiences, Guyana would be considered a tiny state. You know, Gail spoke correctly in this audience about Guyana being a big country. You know, you have amongst your membership countries, I suspect you have amongst your membership countries with a population of less than 100,000. That's less than the payroll of some multinational companies. And it's less than a small village in many big countries. And my argument has always been, as long as we accept small states and the right of small groups of people to self-determination and form a small state, then we have to internalize the implications of smallness for the institutions of governance and the institutions of state that we endeavor to establish in those small states. To give you a simple example, no matter how big or how small a country is, you require some amount of diplomatic representation. You have to have an embassy in Washington, D.C., and PR office in New York, and perhaps an embassy in London, and the major capitals of the world. I'm not suggesting that you have, at a minimum, no matter how small a state you are, I suspect the tiniest microstates of the world. And the Commonwealth comprises a membership that includes, at one end of the spectrum, India, and at another end of the spectrum, Palau and Vanuatu in the Pacific. No, I rather suspect that the smallest microstate has diplomatic representation in Washington, D.C., in London, in New York, in the United Nations, maybe in Toronto. I don't want to offend any of my diplomatic colleagues here, whose country I might not be calling as a big country. But wherever the big capitals are believed to be, or the major bilateral partners are believed to be, if you consider the per capita cost of diplomatic representation for a country that has a population of 70,000 persons, as against a country of 60, 70 million, I'm not going to the Indias and Chinas of the world. If you consider the per capita cost only of diplomatic representation, and I extrapolate that to include all of the unavoidable costs of statehood, you have to have a parliament, you have to have periodic elections, you have to have basic institutions of governance, you have to comply with the same UN treaties, and this was the point that Minister Teixeira made. She runs a very formidable operation with a relatively, Gail, I think you said you had did you say you have a larger team than many of your colleagues around the region. But with a very small operation, complies with Guyana's international governance and treaty reporting obligations with a team of 22. In many countries, there would be teams of thousands doing that work. And mind you, Guyana is large in the relative scheme of things here. And so my point really, and Gail repeated some of the community level innovative mechanisms for ensuring accountability, like the village level monitoring, and we do that. When we have a local level civil works contract, we share out the bill of quantity, we post the bill of quantities for the contract at the Neighborhood Democratic Council, the local authority, so that the villagers can know what it is that the contract is supposed to be delivering. I'm not going to repeat those. But what I will say is that when we consider the question of developing institutional models, whether it be an integrity commission or a financial intelligence unit or any other institutional architecture, it is imperative, while we seek to learn as much as we possibly can from the models around the world, it is imperative that we consider the realities of smallness and what those realities of smallness imply for accountability structures like ours. A former Prime Minister of Guyana, Prime Minister Sam Hines, once said it many years ago. In 1997, Guyana hosted the regional conference of an entity called CAICACB, Caribbean Association of Supreme Audit Institutions. These are the audit offices. And Prime Minister Hines then, in fact, I believe he might even have been president during that period, because it was 97 after March. So then President Hines he said the following on the theme of smallness. He said, how do you deal with the question of independence in a society where everybody is either somebody else's cousin, they come from the same village, they went to the same school, their children go to the same school and they attend the same PTA, they belong to the same Rotary Club or Lions Club or JC's Club or whatever other social organization there is. And chances are when they go for their morning jog, they will run into each other. And I see a number of my Caribbean brothers and sisters nodding their heads in enthusiastic recognition of these circumstances. And if in big Guyana, this is a reality that we have to contend with, the reality is that in small societies, issues of relatedness and interconnectedness and the counterfactual issues of independence are far more complicated than in the large metropolises of the world. And so transplanting a model simply because it looks good somewhere else, it might check the box. We have established this institution, and we will report on our UN convention, we have established this institution. But are we serving the cause of effectiveness within our peculiar domestic reality and circumstance? And I urge you to consider and contemplate. Thirdly, ASG spoke of technology, and I'm glad you mentioned it. And you spoke in particular of how the world is changing. You gave that beautiful example of ChatGPT, and we're living in a world today that, I grew up in the world where, perhaps I shouldn't date myself, but I grew up in the world where we still wrote letters and went to the post office and bought a stamp and an airmail sticker and stuck it onto the envelope. ASG, you're far too young to remember that time. But I grew up in the era where you wrote a letter, put it in an airmail envelope, placed your letter on the scale to find out how much that letter will cost to be sent to this particular destination, and bought airmail stamps. And we then waited patiently for the 2 months for the letter to go, and for the 2 months more for the correspondent to decide that they were going to reply to you, and for the 2 months more for the letter to come back to you. And when you heard the postman knock at the door, or you saw that envelope in your mailbox, you opened it with great, I see a gentleman here smiling with recognition. You used to do that. You opened the mailbox with great excitement because you were going to get a reply from your friend from around the other side of the world. Today we live in the age of instantaneity. If we send the message and it doesn't appear and one tick doesn't become 2 ticks immediately, we get anxious. And if the grey tick doesn't become blue tick quickly enough, we get even more anxious. And God forbid, if it turns blue tick and a reply doesn't come, you start cussing in your head. Today we live in the age of instantaneity. And we have to consider how has technology influenced and affected our day-to-day lives, the functions and operations of state, issues related to transparency and accountability, and indeed how technology can be deployed to further strengthen institutions of state, and in particular, institutions associated with protecting accountability, transparency, and good governance. And so the technology question in today's world, particularly in small states where human resources are extremely limited, the technology question, I think, is a very opposite one. And ASG, I'm glad that you mentioned it. And finally, the question of efficiency in government, reducing bureaucracy and red tape. We can set up the biggest of structures. We can set up the most elaborate of integrity commissions and FIUs and whatever you might call them. And they're important, and we must set them up, and we're committed to doing so, and we will do so. But ultimately, if government processes are not simplified to make them transparent and efficient, then we will simply be creating work for entities like the Integrity Commissions, etc. Canon Kendall, you gave an example that triggered my thoughts in this regard, and I like your example, the example of the birth certificate. And the ease and simplicity with which your relative was able to obtain a birth certificate. And that is how it should be with every government process. Every government process. Because at every step of the way that a citizen encounters frustration, they are tempted to say, look, this is not worth my time or the hassle. Let me slip somebody some inducement and get on my way. We live in the real world. That's the reality. At every step of the way that the citizen encounters frustration, they think to themselves, is it really worth standing up in this line for another 4 hours? Or should I give somebody a small piece to go and get a form for me? This is the real world. And so we have an obligation, we have an important responsibility to ensure that we eliminate those opportunities by ensuring that the entire citizen experience is a transparent and efficient one. And I'm glad, Cameron, that you gave that example. Wherever a citizen, whether corporate or natural, interacts with the state, they must be able to enjoy they must know what the process is. It must be a seamless and efficient process. And it must be executed in accordance with its prescribed efficient norms of efficiency. Here again, we in Guyana recognize how important this is. We know that there are some places that function extremely inefficiently. We know that there are some institutions where you have to go maybe 3 times. You go to pick up the form, then you have to go home to fill up the form, then you come back to lodge the form, then you go to another window to pay the fee, then you go to another window to collect your receipt, then you come back to the first window to present your receipt to show that you have paid, and then they say go to another window to collect a chip which will tell you which day you must come back to collect the permit or the license or the... You're laughing. Am I describing a Guyana that is unfamiliar to any of us? I see some people laughing in the room. Perhaps our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean don't face this reality. But I will tell you that in Guyana there are still several institutions that operate in this manner. And our president has been crystal clear on this matter. He has said that the modern Guyana that he has in mind and that his government has in mind is not only a modern Guyana that comprises a spanking new airport or a new airport terminal, spanking new highways, beautiful new hotels, beautiful new housing areas, but then when you go into a government office or even when you go into a private company, you feel like you're stepping back into the Stone Ages. That can't be. That is not the modern Guyana that President Ali has as his vision. The experience of modernity must not be enjoyed only through the fiscal assets that we observe, but they must be enjoyed through every single citizen experience. Whether we are going into a state-owned hospital for treatment, whether we are registering our child to attend a school, whether we are applying for a passport or a birth certificate, whether we are importing an item and we're attempting to clear our goods through the customs. Whatever our interaction is with whichever institution or state it is, it must be based on transparency, predictable, and pre-known processes, and processes that are designed to be efficient and eliminate citizen frustration. And here again, I can tell you that we recognize that we have a lot of work to do in this regard, and we've started that work. In fact, we have a team right now that is working on mapping the processes associated with citizen interaction with the state and identifying opportunities for making these processes efficient. And this is not just, I emphasize, not just a question of reducing or removing red tape or removing bureaucracy. It goes to the core of good governance because it eliminates citizen frustration and therefore it eliminates opportunities for corrupt behavior. I could go on and on, ladies and gentlemen, but I did promise you brevity. I know that that would still allow me another half an hour or so. But I see Gail shaking her head in stern disapproval. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Guyana once again, and I wish you productive deliberations and an enjoyable stay in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for those warm and inspiring words, and for reminding us of the government's commitment for good governance and declaring this conference open.
Oh, my apologies. Was I supposed to do that?
Nonetheless, we're almost at the end of this morning's proceedings, and we'll have at this time the vote of thanks by Ms. Liza Hanuman. She's the legal and compliance officer of the Guyana Integrity Commission. Welcome.
A pleasant good afternoon. I really would like to wish you a pleasant good morning, but time did not permit. And on the issue of time, in the interest of time and efficiency for the accommodation of activities following the itinerary, all diplomatic protocols, procedures, courtesies, pleasantries, formal and professional salutations and greetings are hereby observed. To special invitees, guests represented by participating entities in their various capacities locally and internationally. The Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, in collaboration with the CAICACB, commemorates its 9th annual conference of the CAICACB this week. In so doing, our sincere thanks are extended to the following persons in their participation, cooperation, kindness, attendance for making this conference a vibrant reality in Guyana. Firstly, the prestigious members of government of Guyana, with specific reference to our beloved Prime Minister, herein represented by the Honorable Minister Ashton Singh, and more particularly for her staunch and unwavering support on issues of good governance, transparency, ethics, and integrity in Guyana, the Honorable Madam Minister Ms. Gail Teixeira. Profound thanks are extended to her team at the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, the National Coordinating Committee, and the Integrity Commission of Guyana. Secondly, to the esteemed Commonwealth entity, His Excellency Professor Louis Franceschi and delegates collectively, we extend our deepest thank you for your sincere support, which comes in a variety of kindness to the Republic of Guyana, especially in the developing realm of transparency. To Dr. Roger Quarantine for his continued guidance on public sectorial transparency and skills training whenever the need arises. Special mention of gratitude is given to the executive members of the Caribbean, or the CAICACB, the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, Ms. Alicia Williams, and the schools represented here. Lastly, to those persons too numerous to mention who gave readily their kindness, time, and support in various capacities, your service is deeply appreciated. We thank you collectively. Do have a pleasant and productive week ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Hanwon. We've now come to the end of this 9th conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. That's a tongue twister. We've come to the end of the conference opening, and you may leave, I suppose. No, all jokes apart. I'd like to invite the first row for a group photo, as well as the delegates, the distinguished delegates, all the delegates, including Guyana's participants. We also have some refreshments for those who would be leaving us. Just feel free to join us briefly before you leave. I know it's lunch, but you may help yourselves.